Look at this massive radish. This is a black Spanish round radish and it's huge. Little yellow cherry tomatoes. These are from a plant that has self-seeded, so these are freebies. Little winter tomatoes. So this is a bok choy that's gone to seed, and these were flowers which are now all seed pods, and these are edible as well, but these taste kind of like cabbage, so they're not my favourite. They're crunchy but pretty cabbagey, especially when they're getting a little bit older. When they're fresh and young, they're a little sweeter, so you can eat these, obviously pop these in a salad or a stir fry, but they're not my favourite, so I am going to leave these to go to seed so then I can get heaps of my own bok choy seeds from my garden. So once these start to go brown, I will harvest them and then I'll let them dry off before saving the seeds, which are inside these individual pods. First thing in the morning is the best time to be harvesting your flowers. Once they are open, they are at their most hydrated then, and the bees haven't quite woken up, so I'm not fighting off too many bees to be harvesting these flowers. The great thing about harvesting your flowers is that they'll produce lots more flowers on that plant. So your plant's main objective is to be producing seeds for a new generation, and if you are harvesting those flowers regularly, then they're going to think that they need to produce more, so it'll send off a whole flush of new flowers, rather than if I sort of let them die off on the plant. That can really slow down the production, and it's like, sweet, I've got my seeds, I'm sorted. Alright, so this is Rocket or Arugula, and it is massive, it is wild, it's going all over the pathways, and it's also going to seed. So the flowers and the seed pods are edible on the rocket, and I love the seed pods. When they're young and fresh and green, they're crunchy, fresh, they're a little bit sweet, they're a little bit peppery, they are delicious in salads, and I have a whole lot of them, so I'm going to preserve some of them. So we are going to harvest heaps and we'll go inside and see what we can make. And now by trimming this back, I have found a kale, so there's a little hidden kale in there. Okay, so I'm also going to harvest off some of the outer leaves of my massive cauliflower plants, because these are small garden beds and they are shading out a lot of the other plants, and there is plenty of leaves for them to produce food for the plant. So I'm going to trim off some of the outer leaves and we're going to use those as well. So by trimming off some of these outer leaves, I've now exposed a whole lot more of my garden, so I can start planting, you know, new things in here whilst I'm still waiting on my cauliflowers. Look at the size of this. Okay, so we have a whole bunch of greens from the garden. This is a massive pile of rocket, and this is only a tiny part. There's still heaps more in the garden, but didn't want to overwhelm myself with harvesting it all, so we're just going to work with this for now. I don't actually like to do big harvests like this. I find them really overwhelming, and I don't want to waste any of the stuff by not using it, or you know. So I much prefer to harvest as I go and just pick leaves and eat things throughout the week for all my meals. But because I have been away, there's an oversupply, and I need to start getting these gardens ready for the next season and finding some room to plant my spring and summer veggies. So I've harvested a whole bunch. A lot of it is going to seed as well. So there's a few little friends that have come along for the ride. So I need to take these out and separate off the leaves and the seed pods, and I'm going to put the leaves and the flowers in a pesto, and then I'm going to pickle the seed pods of the rocket or arugula, however you like to call it. I call it rocket, so sometimes people get confused and don't know what I'm talking about. So some of these seed pods are going to be a little bit older and are closer to going to be actual seeds, and they won't be as nice. So I'm just tasting them. So some of them that feel a lot harder on the outside, those are going to be getting close to being seeds, and so they're not very tasty. You want more of the younger, fresher ones that are softer. They're a little bit skinnier compared to the other ones. Have started to bulb out with the seeds. So I don't know if you can see that the fat one here, that one's getting ready for seeds, and this one is a young seed, so it's still yummy and fresh. So I'm just ripping off the ends, which are all the flowers, and like the flowers and the stems, they're really soft, so they'll be fine for a pesto. Okay, so I have a big bowl of rocket. This is rocket leaves, rocket flowers, a few you know, young stems from the ends, and now I'm going to turn this into a pesto so that I can use it on pastas, on crackers, on platters, all the things. So this recipe is on my website, but I'll pop the link to it below. It's just a really easy garden pesto. I use this with heaps of different greens. I make a nasturtium one, a fennel frond one, a mixed green one with all random greens from my garden, and it's pretty simple. So I'm gonna make mine just in my NutriBullet. It's easy, chuck it all in, whiz it. I just want to pick some lemons from the garden, and like this is a normal size lemon I picked, and then look at the size of this one. It's a huge lemon, and it's really heavy too. So I use walnut seeds for my pesto just because I find them more economical, but I also will sometimes add in pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds. You can use any nuts really to make a pesto. Rocket, once rocket goes to flower, once most things go to flower, they can be quite bitter, and rocket gets very peppery. So this is going to be a pretty strong batch. So I might actually throw in some kale to help mellow it out a little bit and fill it out, and I can have heaps more pesto because I'm going to preserve a whole bunch of this. I'm going to freeze it into some ice cube trays, and that way I can use it throughout the year. Freezing is one of my favorite ways to preserve food because it is so easy, it's convenient, and it's a great place to start for beginners. So today we are going to do quite a lot of freezing. I'm going to also freeze the rest of the greens, so we'll get those prepared as well, and I'll show you how I do that. But let's make some pesto. So we just picked this kale, and this is one of my favorite kales to grow actually. This is the Tuscan kale. I am not a big fan of the really curly, frilly kales, although some of them are really beautiful in the garden. They're just not my favorite to eat. So This one I love, and it still looks really beautiful in the garden. This time of year it is actually quite good to cut the whole plant off, so I'm going to cut a few more of these off in the next week because they are starting to go to flower as well. During this season I tend to just pick the outer leaves off the kale and use those in my stir fries, curries, sandwiches, salads, smoothies, all the things. So I also will prepare a whole bunch of these for the freezer as well. Now to make the pesto, blanch the greens. This time I'm just going to blanch the kale. It softens it up and it helps it retain its bright green colour. And then I just add 2 cups of greens, which is roughly 2 handfuls of greens, along with some garlic, a quarter of a cup of olive oil, a splash of water, a tablespoon of lemon juice, and a pinch of salt. And then I blitz that first before adding in the seeds or nuts. In this case I used a cup of walnuts, but you can find the whole recipe on my blog, which I'll leave a link to in the description. For any extras, I just pop it in ice cube trays and freeze this for longer term storage. To make the pickled seed pods, I just packed a sterilised jar with the washed and cleaned seed pods and then poured over a simple pickling liquid. For this I just did 1 cup of white vinegar, 1 cup of distilled water, a teaspoon of sugar and a teaspoon of salt, and then just mix that together in a jar and then just poured that into the seed pods, secured the lid, and then I'll place this in the fridge and this will be ready to eat after a few days, and I'll leave it in the fridge up to 1 or 2 months. So now I'm just gonna get a pot of ice cold water. These big ice cubes are so handy. And just blanch these greens. Just gonna help soften them up, and also they're gonna pack down a whole lot smaller for the freezer. So these are quite thick leaves, so I'll probably be blanching them for about a minute. It also helps them keep their vibrant colour, so you can see that they are a lot brighter green. So another reason to do this before you make pestos and stuff, because it helps them keep their colour. Alright, so then I'm just going to strain off some of this extra liquid and plunge them into the ice cold water. And I'm just doing this in batches so that it's easier to handle. And the ice water just helps them to stop cooking so they don't end up all mushy. Alright, so next up we've got the beet leaves. These are the tops of the beetroot, and I've chopped them up a lot finer because these ones I'm going to label for stir fries. The cauliflower leaves I'm going to use for soups because they are a little bit tougher, but these will be delicious for stir fry. So I'm just blanching off, running a little bit low on water now. These ones are pretty soft, so they don't need long to blanch. Just pull out any of the yucky leaves. These ones probably about 40 seconds, and then they can go into the ice water. Okay, so I've got my greens all blanched and I'm just drying off any of the extra moisture with the tea towels, and then I'm going to pop them in the freezer. I've got my compostable bags and I'll just label them whether I should use them for soups, stir fries or smoothies. So I've got some kale that I'm going to use for smoothies, I've got the beetroot leaves that I'm going to use for stir fries, and then I've got the cauliflower leaves that I'll probably more so use for soups. So I'm just going to label those and get them in the freezer. Easy. Get out all of the extra air. So I just close the bag, leaving a little bit open, squish all the air out. Perfect. Okay, so for the flowers, I've just rinsed off any dirt and I've lightly dried them on the tea towel, and now I'm just going to pop them on this tray somewhere nice and warm and dry and let these dry naturally. It's really dry in Perth, we don't have a lot of humidity, so I can afford to do that, but if you do live in a really humid area, then you probably will need to dry these faster or they will start to go moldy. So you might want to put these on a really low temperature in the dehydrator, but I'm just going to air dry mine. I do have a video on how I preserve my flowers, so I'll pop a link to that if you want to watch more. But with these ones, I'm just going to air dry the calendula, and then the pansies, I'm going to press the pansies, and those are really pretty to be used on cakes and decorating once they're pressed and fully dried. So those will take a couple of weeks to dry in the press. And then these ones, I don't know, probably within the week they'll dry. If they're not drying fast enough, then I can help speed them up in the dehydrator. But I'm just going to be harvesting these from the garden as I see them, so this pile will get bigger and bigger. And as they dry, I'll pop them in a jar, and then I can use those to infuse in oils and make balms and maybe some skin products, because calendula has really healing properties. That is what I'm doing with the flowers. So I've got my little press here. So we've got our greens all ready to go in the freezer. These are going to be super handy. You can chuck these in your soups, smoothies, stir fries when you are running low on greens, or you just want a quick reach into the freezer. So I have labelled them. Make sure you label them so you know what's what. I've labelled them with what they are and what I'll probably use them for, and the date. And then I can pop these straight in the freezer. So you just want to make sure that you've got as much moisture out of them as you can, and try and press out any excess air from the bags, so that it reduces the chance of getting freezer burn. But these are ready to go. And then we've also obviously got our pickled rocket seed pods, so I can't wait to try these. And we've got our pesto, one in a jar, and then also the ones in the freezer. So they're not quite frozen yet, but once they are frozen, I'll just take them out of this mold and I'll put them in a container. And then I've got the beets. They're just going to go in the fridge, and I will use those. I love roasting beets, so I just add them to my roast veggies. Also grated fresh in a salad. What else have we got? Oh, the massive radishes. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with those yet, so I'm going to probably do a bit of an experiment with the radishes, so stay tuned for that. And next up, we are going to be talking about how to save seeds. So we've picked a whole bunch of these seed pods, but there's heaps still out there, and there's lots of other things that have gone to seed. So that will be coming up soon as well. So if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.